Today, night and Milky Way photography. It's my favorite time of year for those of you in the Northern Hemisphere to be out doing this. We're gonna do a ton in the Owens Valley soon. I'm gonna remind everyone why I love, swear by, and stand by this little move, shoot, move star tracker to get the best quality Milky Way images I've ever gotten. I'm gonna share a little tip on calibrating this laser polar alignment tool for those of you who have one. I'll also talk about how to use a laser polar alignment tool with a larger tracker to more easily get a polar alignment. And we'll talk a little bit about stacking versus tracking and ways to just get really great Milky Way images this year. Well, hey everyone, it's Hudson. Welcome to this week's video. We're going to talk about star stacking and tracking and tips and tricks for better using the star tracker that you have, whether you have a large one like the Ioptron Sky Guider Pro that I started out with, or whether you have this little 1.5 pound move, shoot, move that I love, cherish, and use constantly. I'm going to throw some links out to gear. I've got a whole bunch of links. Actually, there's a free download for all the night photography gear that I use. I'll put a link to that in this video's description, as well as the Milky Way course that I created, which talks about stacking versus tracking and a lot of the techniques and things in much more depth than we'll cover in this video. If you want to check it out and look at the outline for it, you can find all that at hudsonhenry.com/Milky Way. We're going to actually be doing an office hours on night photography September 6th. That's a big free group get-together photography meeting, 10 a.m. Pacific. You're welcome to join us YouTube Live or on Zoom. And you can sign up at hudsonhenry.com/office hours and leave us a question. Any photographic topic is fine for the questions, but we're going to cover night photography questions first. We'll talk about Milky Way, constellation, moon photography. We'll kind of cover the spectrum. So in this video, I want to dispel a couple of misconceptions I think people have from the questions that I've been getting about night photography, about using, and specifically the move, shoot, move star tracker, but star trackers in general versus stacking capture techniques, which is a technique where you capture shorter duration images to not have the stars moving without moving your camera on a tracker, and then blend those in post to get less noise. So I want to dispel a couple misconceptions about that technique and talk about why I really prefer to use the tracker whenever I can for my night photography work. And in either case, if I'm doing night landscape photography, which is what we're talking about here, I think that deep space kinds of photography with long lenses is a whole nother topic. If that's what you're here for, I think there's people who are better versed in that stuff. I'm more a person to sit back and look at what the Hubble used to do and what the Webb Space Telescope does now, and other photographers who have telescope setups. You know, for me, I just love to capture the landscape with the stars pinpoint, constellations pinpoint, full moons rising and setting, or the Milky Way hovering over some spectacular, iconic landscape. It's a challenge, it's fun. When I do that dark sky work, whether it's constellations or the Milky Way, I tend to capture my foreground at blue hour as the last bit of blue light is still reflecting around the horizon from the sunset, or as the very first dawn light is coming around the corner before dawn, and get just a little light on the landscape, real long exposure. I'm not worried about the sky. I'm going to composite a really beautifully captured Milky Way from my star tracker into that scene, or from a stacked capture. So the difference I think that we should first talk about is star stacking versus tracking. Tracking is where you set up a device that actually counteracts the rotation of the Earth, and it keeps the stars still in the frame, so you can do really long exposures without them trailing, like you see in star swirl photographs. You know, if you have just a little bit of trailing, it tends to look like blurry stars, which is kind of what we used to do. We had this old rule 30-second exposures for 14mm lenses, which had a bit of trailing, and now that we have such higher resolution, we can get better quality images, we can really see that, and that's where a tracker can eliminate that, or doing stacked capture. And stacked capture is actually something that came to us from the video world. In video noise reduction, some brilliant people developed this technique where the frame of the video that's being analyzed for noise reduction is compared to 10 frames ahead of it and 10 frames behind it, and anything that should be the same area that has changes those changes, let's say it's the sky or the dark color of a chair, the software analyzes that, finds objects that are the same, and finds pixels that have changed between all those frames and eliminates the randomness, which is noise. And you get these nice, clean videos from high ISO, what would normally be really noisy video. And some brilliant photographer, computer programmer, figured out software for both the Mac and the PC. For the PC, it's called Sequitur. It's free. For the Mac, it's Starry Landscape Stacker, which is a reasonable priced software package, whereby you capture a whole bunch of short duration images of the night sky. It finds the stars, aligns them, because each image is going to be slightly moving because of the Earth's rotation, and then looks for randomness in between the stars, which is noise, and eliminates it. So I think a lot of people have the misconception that that software actually is some kind of an additive process where the exposure from each frame is added up to create one brighter frame in the end. And that's not really the case. You're capturing an underexposed image, a shorter shutter speed than you'd like for the Milky Way. But in post-production, you can pull that night sky's brightness up and not get the kind of noise that you'd normally get from really underexposed shadows, because you've done this treatment that eliminates noise. It lets you pull really underexposed shadows up without the noise and some of the posterization that you'd often consider would be part of the scene. So you can shoot at a little higher ISO and you just shoot shorter duration images. If you want to know more about all that, there's lots of other sources out there. I talk a lot about it in my Milky Way training course. Again, you can find out more about that at hudsonhenry.com/Milky Way. The problem for me is, when I have students do this in the field during workshops, people look at it and they say, there's nothing here. You look at the back of your camera and it's a really dark exposure. You're underexposing the night sky. And so you're not able, it's even difficult to check focus. You got to look at the brightest planets and stars in the scene, zoom in on them, and you're looking at something kind of dim, and you make sure that it's pinpoint. You're not really seeing the final result until you bring it into the computer and you combine, say, those 20 frames that you captured sequentially using your intervalometer. Each one of them, say, 7 seconds, depending on your lens, depending on your sensor. There's calculations for that. But you got to blend all those images and pull the shadow detail up in post-production to see your final image. It's kind of a mystery in camera. It's almost like the days of shooting film where you're not sure whether you got what you were after until you get home and do the post-production work on it. The thing I love about the star tracker is that I'm able to get that image of the night sky that I want right there and look at it in my camera and make sure that it's sharp, make sure that it's composed the way that I want, make sure I have my focus right and my exposure right. It's just all going to be right there to look at on the back display of my camera. And the Move Shoot Move is my favorite way to do this because it weighs 1.5 pounds. And I use one extra head with it. I use an Acrotech GXP head, which I think is the best ball head on the planet. And you kind of need a ball head for the star tracker work. I'll tell you why in a second. Then it weighs 1 pound and locks down 50 pounds of weight. So it's the whole setup together weighs 2.5 pounds extra in my bag and takes up almost no space. Again, I've got a free download of all the equipment that I use for night photography, and you can find the link to that in this video's full description. Just click the title or show more, depending on what platform you're watching this video. So I'm going to show you how this thing gets set up, why I really think you should have 2 tripod heads, a pan and tilt head underneath, whether it's a fluid head or whether it's something like my ultralight custom tripod setup that I build and sell here with the Acrotech panorama head on it, or the fluid head setup that I frequently use and also build custom rigs, and then a ball head up above the tracker. So if you look at the links that I have the Move Shoot Move Star Tracker, which kit you should get. It's kit B. You can get a little discount going through my link for these. It's like 10% off if you use my code. But essentially, you rotate your Arca clamp so that it's on the same axis as the tilt, so that when you're tilting, it's left-right from the tilt. These heads, the thing I love about them is they pan and they tilt. And my ultralight tripod setup, this whole thing weighs 4 pounds and gets up to eye level when you extend its legs. They have the ability to level from beneath. So there's a nice big bubble level on this head, and I simply loosen the built-in leveling adapter on this tripod, the 284 CEX legs, lock it, boom. Now everything I do, I'm going to stay level. I drop my star tracker in here, clamp it with that awesome Acrotech lever clamp, and then I'm gonna grab my reading glasses and adjust this thing. I'd probably be using my red headlamp. I'm gonna adjust it down to about 45 degrees because I'm on the 45th parallel here in Oregon from a geographic perspective, and that's gonna be about the tilt angle I want to align with Polaris, the North Star. You know, Polaris is something that's easy to find. If you can find the Big Dipper in the night sky and the Little Dipper, you can find Polaris. I talk about that in my course description. You can find it in other website references on the internet. But you're gonna get that tilt the way that you want it. You're gonna take your ball head, and the reason we're gonna go with the ball head here is because you can't get level on top of the tracker. This is the upper head you're gonna mount your camera to. You're gonna get the polar alignment with this pan and tilt head very easily because you can make micro adjustments to tilt, you can make micro adjustments to pan, so you can move the laser point left and right. We're gonna use this little, very high powered laser that comes with the move, shoot, move, and we're simply gonna clip it to the side of our star tracker here with this little nylon screw. Won't do any damage to the metal that this is all made of. And when we turn it up, whoop, oh, there, yeah, I didn't screw. The one thing, see, it's all these checklists. You gotta thread the other little nylon adjustment screw into your laser to lock it in. I'm gonna show you how to calibrate this laser in just a second. But we're gonna lock that in there, and then when we turn it on, it's, in the night, believe me, it's like a lightsaber into space. You can see the whole beam shooting up. When you activate this, make sure there are no planes anywhere near the path you're sending it in. You don't wanna blind a pilot with this extremely bright laser. I think that gives you an idea just how bright this thing could be. Don't point it at your friends and don't point it at any pilots. But you're gonna get that thing locked in there, turn the thing on, and then as you watch it, you can't see it right now. If I tilt down exaggeratedly, you can see it on the wall behind me. You're gonna get that little beam pointed right at the North Star, and with this head, you can just do slight tilts to go up and down. You can do slight pans to go left and right. It makes it really easy having a pan and tilt head or a fluid head underneath this. And once you get it where you want it, you just lock your settings and you don't move your head at all. The lower head is locked. That's the polar alignment. And now this little turntable, it's almost like a vinyl record player, is just gonna spin right underneath this head when you activate the tracker, and it's gonna eliminate the Earth's rotation from your scene. Basically, the camera is moving with the stars to keep them still in the frame. You can do really long exposures at lower ISO and get beautiful high quality images of the night sky and see that they're well exposed in camera. You're gonna actually be working with your histogram and getting a well exposed Milky Way in a single shot. You know, say you're working with a 1.8 20mm Nikkor lens, my favorite night sky lens. I tend to do a 90-second exposure, 500 ISO on the Z9, wide open at f1.8, and I get these beautiful Milky Way shots where I can look in and see the whole thing right on the back of the camera, make sure my composition's right, zoom into 100%, make sure that the stars are nice and sharp and I nailed my focus. So that's the reason I love to use the tracker. Once I get it aligned and set up, I'm really careful. You know, I can get my composition using the ball head, even though, you know, I don't have to level from beneath with a ball head. This is the one case where I love using a ball head. I can go wherever I want. I watch the level indicator on the back of my camera. Boom, I get my composition. I activate the tracker. I trigger the camera. I let it run for 90 seconds. I get no star trailing. All right, that's the beauty of it. Every now and then, I reactivate my laser, look up at Polaris, say, ooh, it's still aligned. If it's a little bit off because someone's bumped it or I've moved around or in jiggling something, I just do a little adjustment up, down, left, right using that pan and tilt head, and boom, I'm set. So that's really the setup right there. Now, I promised I would give you a little tip on calibrating this laser that comes with the Move, Shoot, Move system. And you know, it's funny, there are other videos out there on YouTube about this, and you can check them out. There's other websites about doing this. It's something I didn't even know was a problem until some of the some of the students that I've recommended get this said they were having problems, and a bit of research goes by, and I actually owe my good friend Al Akins, who's done a number of workshops with me and become a good friend over the course of the years, for shooting me a reference to calibrating this thing. And I don't necessarily agree with the video that he sent me on the easiest way to calibrate this little laser, but I do agree that it's something important to double check and to see that it is calibrated and that you've got a nice, accurate, straight line coming out of this laser when it's mounted on your move, shoot, move. Because what can happen is it can get a little off to the left, it can get a little off to the right, a little up and down, depending on how you mount it in here. And this newer laser that Move Shoot Move is shipping has two little 2mm Allen screws in the side of its casing up near the front. And if you look at the front of the laser, you'll notice that the actual orifice that the laser comes up out of is a little brass insert. And you can move it left and right and up and down on its X or Y axis with these two Allen keys. Counterclockwise moves it one direction, clockwise moves it the other direction, the other screw moves it the other opposite, left, right. So one's up, down, the Y, the other's left, right. Of course, it depends on how it's mounted in here. And there are people that do videos that say, you should mount it in here, put up a piece of construction paper or something. I'm using a whiteboard that I have here in my studio, and see if as you rotate it, it stays fixed. All right, so I've got this whiteboard that I tend to diagram out things I want to do for approaching the seam videos or courses, and I mount my kids' art from school and stuff on. And as I rotate this, just kind of holding it in place without locking it with the set screw, I'm just holding it nice and snug as if the set screw were in. It's not really moving for me. Mine is calibrated well. If I were to turn this set screw, say, a turn or a half a turn, or let's go a full turn. I'll turn it a full turn. I'll put it back in here and I'll rotate it, and you see now all of a sudden as I turn this, it's carving this big circular arc around my whiteboard. Now you can use a brick wall, you can use a big piece of construction paper. I would set it back far enough. The farther you set it back, the more you're gonna see this thing being out of whack or not. But the video that I watched and some of the instructionals I've seen talk about, drawing the outer boundaries of that circle on the surface you're projecting onto. For me, it would be the whiteboard. And then, drawing a line through it and creating a point in the center of that circle, and then adjusting the X and Y screws on this to move the laser to that point. Well, the problem for me is that how this mounts in the Move Shoot Move, it covers those screws, at least with my Move Shoot Move. If yours is different, let me know and I'll talk to Move Shoot Move. But mine, I can't really access the screws while it's snug in there and I'm rotating it. And that causes it to be really difficult to use that technique so far as I'm concerned. Plus the fact that as you rotate it, X becomes Y, Y becomes X. It's just difficult to know where to turn which screw. So for me, the way that I've found is easy to calibrate this thing is just looking straight down on it. And right now I know I need to turn it one full turn counterclockwise because I turned it one full turn clockwise to get out of balance. But essentially, as I turn this screw, you see it moving on its axis, and you just center that little laser orifice perfectly into the middle of the front of the laser. And you can eyeball it and get really, really close. I haven't had much problem. I've taken it out of whack and put it back in whack. And by activating it, I put it in here and I'm back as I hold this thing still. It's not really moving as I rotate it. Well, it's a little bit just because I'm wiggling it, but there we go. I'm rotating it and it's just fine. All right, so to me, I would approach it from that way. If yours is different and you can actually adjust the X and Y axis while it's in the mount snugly, well, then let me know. Maybe they've changed their mounts since I got my system. But for me, just looking down at the front of it and adjusting it, that's the best way for me personally to get this thing calibrated. And it will make a difference. If this thing's out of whack, you're not really truly pointed right at the North Star. It could throw your alignment out a little bit. Now, I don't think it's going to be the end of the world. I think if you're close and you're working with a 20 millimeter or wider doing Milky Way photography like most of us do, where it's going to really matter is if you get into 50 and 75 or 85 or 100 millimeter compositions where you're looking at, say, just a piece of the Milky Way behind a beautiful piece of landscape, or you're doing tighter scenes of the Milky Way to put into longer lens night scenes, that sort of thing, then this would really matter. You know, the wider the angle, the less perfectly accurate it has to be for that tracking to keep you in the ballpark, particularly if you're using a fast lens like the 21.8 and you only need a 90-second exposure. I think when you get into longer exposures and longer focal lengths, this is going to matter more and more. All right, so I talked about a couple of the reasons why I love the Move Shoot Move Star Tracker. You know, I would never recommend the Star Tracker for longer lens work or bigger, heavier setups. This is really the perfect little setup to throw in your adventure photography bag or your backpack. It weighs, like I said, 1.5 pounds, simple rechargeable battery. And this laser makes alignment really, really simple. I love the laser alignment because, like I talked about, the way I do these composite captures, you know, you shoot your blue hour landscape, go set up, shoot your sunset shot. As soon as sunset's over, set up for that Milky Way image you want, you know, where you know the Milky Way is going to be. Use your Photo Pills app, and all that stuff's in my Milky Way course. But you capture that blue hour image and then run up to an open vantage point, move. Maybe you get up to a hilltop in the same location where the Milky Way is behind your subject, and set up to capture that Milky Way with as little obstruction in the foreground as possible using the Star Tracker. And the ability to just zap, nail the North Star with this little laser and set up in the darkness is really wonderful. You know, if you're looking up, you can still see the constellations amongst all those stars in the night sky, and dial in on Polaris as how it's part of the Little Dipper with the Big Dipper's front edge pointing at it. Boom, you nail it. Make sure it's locked in, set up your camera, get your composition, get your focus, double check you're still lined up on Polaris, get it all kind of dialed in, take your shot, boom, you're done, you go home. All right, so I love the fact that it's so small and light and so easy to get composition. If you're doing work where you need more stability, or if long ago you decided you wanted to do star photography and you read articles and you got this Ioptron sky guider or something of its ilk, a little bit bigger, burlier star tracker. These things are great. This is, by all measures, a more stable, easier to use star tracker once it's set up and aligned. You know, it's just rock solid. But it's difficult to find Polaris with its optical illuminated reticle system. So this has a little telescope that goes right through the center of it, and it rotates the same way as the Move Shoot Move. It's just bigger and burlier and can hold more weight. And the whole thing's heavier and really is more based on having your car right next to you when you're working. You know, I carry this in a giant Pelican case. But when I take this little cap off and I look through this, I see a little illuminated glowing red crosshair that I can align on Polaris and know that then this thing's rotating. I do the same thing. I mount my camera up here in this ball head. Boom, I get my composition dialed in. You know, bam. It's rotating with space. But the problem is that if you try to set this up in the dark sky and find Polaris, what you see through this illuminated reticle is a field of bright looking stars. It's not hard to set it up in blue hour when just a few stars are peeking out, those constellations come out. You can't see the rest of the deep space stars. You know, Polaris stands out. It's the only star up there, and you know, you point it sort of at it, find the star in the blue, boom. But the minute that space comes out and all those stars are gleaming in a night sky location, it becomes downright impossible, at least for me, to find Polaris in this thing. I have to set it up in blue hour and then not move it whatsoever. So it's less versatile. But the little trick I've found is that by using a really high-powered laser like the one that comes with the Move Shoot Move, you can just line it up through the illuminated reticle and shoot right through that little telescope that's built into this, look up into the sky, and make some adjustments. So maybe I shoot up and I go, ooh, I'm too low, and I'll move my adjustments up a little bit. Ooh, I'm a little too off to the right. I'll move my adjustments to the right a little bit. This thing's built on a different kind of system. You kind of get close with your setup and and make minor shifts with adjusters. It's geared, let's put it that way. But at any rate, this will let you, with little movements up, down, left, right, get to where your little laser's close to Polaris, pointing right through the center of this little telescope that's an illuminated reticle. And then when you look up through it, there'll only be one bright star in the frame. You'll know that's Polaris. And then you just make your micro adjustments to get it perfectly aligned on Polaris. So using a laser through the illuminated reticle of a bigger, heavier duty star tracker is a great way to find Polaris in the dark. That's a trick that I just love. I do want to give a little word of warning to those who are using the Move Shoot Move about some of the accessories. They have an illuminated reticle that you can buy as an accessory for this, and I just didn't feel it was really ready for prime time. I would much rather use the little laser, the little calibratable laser in its mount. It's simpler, it's easier, it's a little bit more, it's definitely way more refined, and it simplifies the whole process. And I don't think the other one is really a thing that's going to give you any more accuracy than the laser, to be honest with you. It's a little rough in its implementation. The other thing that is available for these are these little Z plates and V plates that are supposed to let you get your head, that are supposed to allow you to get your head mounted level, as if we had a leveling adapter beneath. So let's say we're tilted out about 45 degrees. They make these plates that you can mount on here to where then you mount your head level. And that's the idea, is that then you can do panoramas or whatnot. And the thing that I have found, even trying those things out, is that they are like putting a diving board underneath your head. And what I mean by that is, one thing you'll notice about this is it's rock solid and stable. I can put my Z9 with my 21.8 or my 14 to 24 on here. I put a sandbag or a big, huge couple of stones in here just to weight this little tripod down. I'm more likely to use it with my bigger, ultra tall, lightweight fluid head setup, the custom tripod that I build with the Manfrotto 500AH fluid head on it. Just from having more weight makes it more stable. But the thing is that the setup itself, I'm putting weight on here, and you don't see any flex in the Move Shoot Move on this really high quality Acrotech pan and tilt panorama head. It's not flexing at all. If I put the Z plate or the V plate on there, it's like a diving board. I push down on this and the whole thing's like, it just reduces stability to the point where there's certainly no way I want to do ultra long night exposures on it. And I haven't found any way to get them stiff. It's just by putting that hinged thing underneath there. I just can't recommend it. I really can't recommend it. So I feel pretty strongly about that. All right, so there you go. Some tips and tricks for those of you who enjoy doing night photography. Again, stacking can get you great results. It's just more work in post-production, and it's less satisfying in the field, and it's a little more nerve-wracking that maybe you didn't get it quite right and you're not going to find out till you got home. I really, really prefer perfecting my image with a tracker. This is not a terribly expensive instrument. I got links in this video's description with a discount, and it doesn't weigh very much. You're throwing 2.5 pounds in your bag, and it opens up the night sky world for you to work with, okay? All right, so again, office hours about night photography, Tuesday, September 6th, 10 a.m. Pacific. Please join us. You can sign up at hudsonhenry.com/office hours. Big group get together. We're taking your questions. Submit them when you sign up. I hope everybody is out there staying creative, staying safe, having fun. I've got free downloads to all the night photography gear I recommend, from lens warmers to external power supplies to the Move Shoot Move heads. You name it. We've got these tripods in stock. They've been selling fast, but I still have parts to build more, both of the ultralight 4-pound setup and the tall, light fluid head setup. So those are always out there available. Check them out. And I can't wait to get into the Owens Valley with the 12 of you who are coming. My good friends, Rick, CJ, and David. We are going to have an awesome time, and we're going to do a ton of Milky Way photography. And it's that time of year where we still get to get our sleep and then capture dawn too. So this is a wonderful time for night photography. For those of you that are out doing it here in the Northern Hemisphere, I hope you're having fun. Stay safe. We'll see you next week.